All right, the data's in from 2022. It paints a stark picture of gun violence in this country. There were 648 mass shootings last year. That's 4 or more victims. That's the second highest number on record, coming in just behind 2021. And so it's no wonder that many Americans live in a sort of a state of high alert, fearing that they may be caught up in the next horrific event. And that's the context for this story, highlighted in the New York Times today. Last March, a 22-year-old man was spotted coming out of a bathroom of an Atlanta supermarket, quote, wearing body armor and carrying 6 loaded weapons, end quote, including an AR-15 style rifle. Panic and terror ensued, along with the evacuation of the store. Thankfully, as the young man's lawyer notes, he did not make, quote, any threats or fire any shots, and he was arrested without incident. But as the New York Times puts it, his arrest kicked off a long and as yet unresolved legal odyssey in which the criminal justice system waffled over what it could charge him with and whether to set him free. Clearly, visiting the grocery store with a trove of guns had frightened people, but was it illegal? Here to help us dive into that question is Ryan Busse, a former firearms executive. He's the author of the book Gunfight: My Battle Against the Industry That Radicalized America, and Chris Brown, president of the Brady Organization that works to end gun violence. Welcome to both of you. Thank you for being with us. Chris, there's a lot to the story, this Atlanta story. And in fact, the man in question is back in jail, but it still remains unclear and unresolved. Did he commit a crime? His lawyer says no.
Right. I know. I read that article this morning and I actually tweeted out about it as soon as I read it, because ultimately what we see here is a long-standing push by the NRA to make it so we have guns everywhere. It's not a surprise. Only in America would we find someone who had not 1 but 2 but multiple guns, including an AR and body armor, in a Publix, and it's absolutely terrifying. What's worse is that in many states that have removed permitting systems, both concealed carry and open carry, the issue for prosecutors is what is the norm for behavior? Without permitting systems that are robust around where and when you carry guns in public, you have a difficult time as a prosecutor making the case that what was happening was grossly irresponsible and reckless, which is the kind of standard you need to bring these kinds of charges.
Ryan, you come from an industry, and I'm an avid consumer of the publications that come out from the industry because they're so interesting to understand how the psyche comes around, that has built this psyche over years, that has caused demand for guns that in most cases people don't need. This is not a Second Amendment thing. This is people owning a lot of guns and the paraphernalia that goes along with it, because it does attempt to normalize that sort of behavior.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Ali. I think as with a lot of what we face in America sometimes, the tragedy isn't what's illegal. The tragedy here is what's legal. And as you note, this guy didn't need 6 loaded guns, including an AR and a tactical shotgun, to go grocery shopping, right? But yet Georgia is one of the states that Chris mentioned that has recently rolled back concealed carry permitting. I mean, I think Americans need to think about it this way. We have about 270 million registered vehicles in the United States, and you don't have to travel very many of our roads to know it seems pretty crowded. We have a lot of traffic laws, right? We've got lines on the road, we've got bumpers, we've got speed limits, we've got police that are patrolling everything. We've got 415 million guns in the United States, and we have the NRA and the NSSF and an irresponsible slice of the American gun consumers, of which I'm not one of those. I am a proud gun owner. I hunted yesterday with my boys, but I'm not okay living in a country with 415 million guns where we're reducing the amount of controls on ourselves, right? That's just insane. We wouldn't roll back with the laws on on 270 million cars, right? You have more cars, you need more laws to control them so that people can stay safe, and this is what we're facing right now.
Chris, you've worked hard to sort of clarify that messaging, and generally it actually works. Most Americans are in favor of certain forms of regulation around guns, whether it's red flag laws or background checks. And we've made incremental progress, very incremental progress on a federal level. We've made better than incremental progress on a state level with respect to guns. But how do we get folks to understand this? That when people say it's about the Second Amendment and the right to self-defense, people in war don't carry the weapons that the average American has.
Well, my partner is actually retired Navy. He was a fighter pilot. And before I came on today, I talked to him about what his requirements were flying over Bosnia, for example. He was issued a gun every time he left the carrier and had to check it back in every time he got back. That's the standard on most military bases in this country. You're not allowed to carry a gun unless you have a specific reason on that duty on that day, and then it goes back in the armory. And I think that part of our history and heritage is actually quite important. We hear references to things like the Wild West, Ali, and in the end, in most of those Western towns, you had to check your gun at the border. You couldn't bring it in. And I think what you see in the polls, which is rising across the country, Americans saying enough, background checks, I want those, extreme risk laws or red flag laws, and assault weapons bans. It's because of things like this. We don't believe that a guns everywhere philosophy as Americans is consistent with our heritage and certainly isn't consistent with our public safety. So we need to see the states incubate much more of a focus around public safety. And
Right.
we need these permitting systems to be put back in place.
Hey, Ryan, you talked about cars and the rules that surround cars, and most people are not going to tell you that those rules shouldn't exist. In San Jose, California, gun owners now have to show proof of insurance covering accidents involving their guns, including recklessness or negligence. It's an interesting proposal. I had a friend of mine suggest this to me a few years back, and I thought, it sounds like an interesting idea. Do things like that help?
Well, I think it highlights the fact that gun owners are responsible for their guns, right? We have to be responsible for the bad things that happen, and that's why we need to adhere to laws and we need reasonable restrictions. I think on top of that San Jose case, we've got the Michigan parents from the Oxford, Michigan shooting that are going to be tried for being, essentially enabling their son being irresponsible in the way that they bought him and provided him guns. And so I think the country is reckoning with the realities of this many guns and this much irresponsible rolling back of legislation. I mean, we've got now this slice of Second Amendment absolutists that literally believe, and I'm not making this up, that there shall be no infringement, as in there can be zero gun laws. I mean, you want a howitzer, you want an A-10 Warthog, they believe that we should have this stuff. And it's just not a civil society, complex democracy cannot function that way.
Chris, I've got 30 seconds left, but do you think we're making progress? There have been a number of state laws that have been brought in the last year. Does it look like progress to you?
It really does, Ali, look like progress. And the biggest note for that, obviously, is Joe Biden last year signing our first major federal law that we've had in 30 years, the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act. We need much more, but the momentum is with us, and people are fed up and fired up, especially younger voters, around this issue.
Thanks to both of you for joining me this evening, and a very happy 2023.